Diary of a Prisoner of War. OC. The following are excerpts from the Diary of Prisoner 118, Cato of Clan Savani, Sergeant-at-Arms of the Imbacani Imperium during the 2 months of his incarceration at Prisoner of War Facility 5 Lima. They have been abridged for the sake of brevity and translated to standard, as the Imbacani language is full of allegory and poetry rather than simple speech. Full transcripts are available in the Terran Archive and Wikimedia pages, as well as original copies available for purchase at any public library. Day 3. I managed to borrow a pen from one of the human guards after I found a blank book in my cell, so I decided to keep a journal of my experiences if I ever get out of here. It's only been 2 days since we started, and apparently most of us only just woke up. The only emotion that is permeating the unit is paranoia. Our accommodations are like nothing we expected. We expected to be piled up on top of one another like cheap foodstuffs, forced to never sleep or subject to experimentation. No. 1 bed per cell, 1 cell per prisoner. And by all the ancestors, what a bed. I feel ashamed at this time to admit it or even consider it. I know not if it was the shock, the awe, or the exhaustion of battle. When my head hit that pillow, I was out cold. 2 days. I was told I was sleeping for 2 solid days. I looked at the bed, sat on it, and my resolve melted. So comfortable. Nothing like the bunk beds we had in our barracks. Did all humans sleep like this? What kind of trick were they playing on us? I was told by one of the guards, one of the so-called legionnaires, another story to tell on that front, that we were asleep for so long they had to wake up one of our medics and make him perform examinations to see if we were okay. We were told to expect cruelty. Torture, we were told to expect them to do to us worse than what we did to them. Looking back on it now, perhaps what the Grand Empire did to that colony was a bit excessive. We were told we were going to face an enemy that offered no quarter. We were told they would take us prisoner just so they could hear us scream before they would get bored and toss us into furnaces. Granted, despite the best efforts of our officers, we surrendered during that first battle. We watched from the skies as they turned our fleet of 27 ships into molten slag, a fleet that would, for the last 6 centuries, be considered invulnerable. The same fleet composition that would have given us countless victories and expanded our empire. They had a fleet of 200 ships. 200. Our fleet of 50 or more ships was considered an absurd decadence. Then we watched them land an army of 10,000. 10,000. In comparison to what we had, 600. A large garrison. 600 was a large garrison. I was told by the same guard that a garrison of theirs was around 2,000 at minimum. Minimum! How many of these damn humans were there? They allowed us to keep our satchels full of food and supplies. I still wonder why. I still have questions. There was no battle. We saw the numbers, saw how they turned our fleet to ashes in minutes. We wanted nothing to do with them. Then we saw those abominations, the legionnaires, monsters, demons. Humans? Who really knows? It doesn't matter now. We now know what kind of enemy we just provoked. We surrendered without a fight. Didn't even erase our data network or cut communications. They probably know everything now. They picked us up, put us in these cells, and are transporting us home. Was this honorable? Probably not. But neither is death to an enemy we can't fight. But why treat us like this? Are they softening us up to make the torture worse? Are they going to starve us and watch us for fun? Nothing makes any sense. Comfy beds, peace, quiet. They aren't hurting us. Marconis next door started coughing up blood. Hidden injury from our surrender when he got whacked by a wayward brick. They immediately dragged our medic out of his cell and took him to a hospital. No laughter. No glee. They showed actual concern. What are they planning? Day 5. Finally got the chance to write again. The previous morning was one of incredible discoveries. Books. A group of guards suddenly flooded the cell block, armed, ready. This is it, we all thought. We were dragged out of our cells, and each one was systematically searched. Contraband check, they called it. By this point, the cell block guard and I had developed a certain rapport. He whispered it was a weekly occurrence, checking us for anything of interest, removing things that could jeopardize safety, theirs or ours. They took nothing out as 2 men searched every nook, cranny, and corner of the room. They then neatly put everything back where they found it and carried it in a bag of some kind, a bag full of books? The bag was opened, and a bag full of 10 books was hauled out and neatly stacked at the foot of the bed. Then we were put back in our cells, and quickly as they came, they retreated, leaving us alone with the guards and our thoughts again. Marconis was put back in his cell, and a new human was added to the guard roster. This one had a red cross on his armband. But the most shocking thing came barely a few minutes ago. Therantar, the only Medici in our unit that came with us. He was taken out of his cell hours ago and returned just now, wearing a Terran uniform, even bearing their flags now, and that Red Cross armband. I was not sure how to feel. Should I have felt happy or betrayed? I had no words. 4 ration blocks left. Day 6. Therantar came in to give me a checkup this morning, something the humans called for to check the health and sanity of all the prisoners. I asked him why he was wearing a Terran uniform. He said nothing. He just smiled at me and continued to work. When he was done, I noticed he was now carrying a pistol, a human pistol on his waist belt. He was one of them now. I don't know how to respond to this, but apparently it was just easier to give him a job. 2 ration blocks left. After this, we fear them poisoning us. Probably like they did to Therantar. How else would he have shifted his loyalties so quickly? There must have been something in the food they gave him. Must be. How can anyone shift their loyalties so easily? So quickly? Must be poisoned or drugged or something. Are they running experiments on us? Must be. No way a man can shift his loyalty so quickly. Especially not him. He was like the sergeants. "For the Empire," he would say, while stitching limbs back onto soldiers. Must be drugging us or something. Must be. I was told we would be reaching planetfall within the next few days. Transfer from a prison ship to an actual prison camp. Maybe that's it. He knew we were getting close to the real experience. The real thing. What the humans were actually planning to do. From the confines of a starship brig to the confines of probably shackles, laboratories, and other things. I shuddered thinking of what would happen. They must be just softening us up to make us easier to something. I don't know anymore. What are they planning? What do they have in mind? This was not the behavior of a mindless barbarian. It was the behavior of a cold, calculating monster. What were they planning? Day 7. Ration blocks gone. None left. Made landfall today. We were taken out of our cells and put in chairs bolted to the floor with things called seatbelts. We were then led out of the ship after we landed, and as soon as we were out, we noticed how advanced the humans were compared to us. The prison ship we were brought in was a cruiser. They had the tech to bring capital ships into planets' gravity wells? They actually could do that? Why was this place so open? Where were the fences? Where were the quarantine posts? Where was anything? No chains, no shackles, not even a rope. We were simply marched through the streets to a facility near a military base location. Chain-link fences, razor wire, sounded normal for a prison, but why did I see grass when I looked into the yard? Why did I see smiling guards? We were under heavy guard, of course, but to walk down the street with people watching, why were they smiling at us? Waving at us? Nobody said or did anything for the time we were on the march. Marconis didn't come with us. He was transferred to a hospital nearby instead of the prison camp. We thought we would never see him again. One of his 4 legs had turned green. Seems the damage he got from that brick was worse than we thought. This prison camp wasn't as guarded as we thought it was, but the mere presence of the Centurions, the lesser but still dangerous variant of the Legionnaires, made us wary and terrified. As soon as we entered the facility, we noticed just how strange it was. This was not a city, but a small rural town in the sticks of a farming world. We wondered why. We were fingerprinted, issued uniforms marked with PW in black lettering, and subjected once again to health inspections. Barracks made of wood and metal, built like the houses around us rather than prison camps. For those of us that braced for brutality, the sight of children playing at the edge of the camp's fence was more than just a little jarring. The barracks buildings housed 50 of us in each building. Not quite as decadent as the individual cells we were given on the ship, but spacious, open. Bunk beds and beddings made specifically for us, not hastily constructed, but rather purpose-built. Mixed species bedding was understandably difficult to manage, as a few of us required special conditions outside of suits. So we were separated by species in some cases and made to sleep in specialized bunks. For most of us, the simple rectangular bed that humans used was enough, either made slightly longer or slightly shorter depending on the occupant. The bedding and accommodation was just as comfortable as those on the ship. They asked us what kinds of qualifications or skills we had, making note of who were mechanics, cooks, anything they could find. If one had a skill, they could make use of it. So that was their plan. They needed labor forces. Suddenly this made sense. They were going to use us to fuel their war machine against us. Made sense. Was the battle just a fluke? Just an accident that they got the upper hand? Were they, in fact, in such dire straits they needed prisoner labor to cover the shortfall? The thought made some of us hope that one day we would see an Imperium fleet in the skies above us, ready to release a glorious retribution. Some of us, though, weren't so easily swayed. In my case, I was a carpenter by trade before I was conscripted. During my time in service, I made cargo crates that would hold provisions and ammunition for my division. The human guards nodded, made a note or two, then sent us to our bunks for the day. But something gnawed at us. We needed food. With the last ration blocks gone, it was nearing the end of the day when we needed to eat. I spotted Therantar later that day, now wearing a different uniform, white doctor's scrubs with a red cross symbol. I saw the writing on the back of his jacket. Médecins Sans Frontières. Don't know what it means, but the fact he was here, and now actively working for the humans in the infirmary, it didn't hurt as much as it should have. As much I was told it should have anyway. Finally the time came. The hunger began to hit us. All of us, at least who we could see, were asked if it was our dinner time or meal time as we know. We all shook our heads and waved the humans off and spent the first night tossing, turning, and pretending to rest as we feared what they would do to us. Day 8. I feel sick. Morning came and we barely slept. The hunger was worsening. We began bargaining for access to the last food ration cube that one of the sergeants hid for just in case. We didn't have very much to bargain for, but we did anyway. We were interrupted by a centurion banging on the camp door, and we were made to stand for inspection. 3 officers and Thrantar, still wearing that uniform, searched our beds for contraband and gave us a medical check again. When we were effectively cleared, we were barked at and told to proceed to the canteen for breakfast. The sight that greeted us in that canteen was overwhelming. I still have stomach cramps from it. Thrantar gave his diagnosis as acute dietary toxic shock, describing the symptoms as the fact we spent the last 5 years eating nutrient-rich ration bars meant that human food, even if it was prepared specially towards our species-specific dietary needs, was too decadent for us to handle. Our meals consisted of real meat, actual meat, the first I had seen in years, stacked high in boxes we could simply reach for and take. We were confused, scared. What was going on? I had no time to think. I was simply hurried forward by the centurions on duty. Make a choice, eat whatever you want, carnivore or herbivore, just make it quick, we don't have all day. They said in my case a scoop of mashed potatoes, a fried chicken breast, and a side of greens, including something called lettuce and carrot, leafy greens, and strangely sweet orange cubes. The taste was like nothing I had ever experienced. An empire of 1,000 worlds, and food was not something we really considered. Nutrient cubes made from farmed products were the norm. A combination of logistics and education told us we don't need to taste, we just need to eat, meaning we had no real concept of culinary arts or such things. To us, food was just food, fuel for the body, fuel for the empire. That first taste broke me. It sent my body into a wild fever dream of deliciousness. The crispness of the skin, the softness and tenderness of the meat inside it. If I didn't feel sick after that, I would have probably started to cry. I now lie in my bunk, a faded light allowing me to write. A bucket to my left with a centurion in a meditative stance standing at the door, a hotline to the infirmary at his belt, waiting for the next one of us to go into toxic shock. The implication that the food was poisoned or laced with chemicals claimed at least half of us, with those few too paranoid to eat anything, pushing their trays aside and pretending to ignore the smells of the food that permeated the air. This didn't last long as the centurions, the humans' precious military police units, came up to our trays and ate from them. The centurion on duty, the one called Lanius, walked up to me as I demanded answers, yelling at the humans that they were poisoning us. I was feeling sick after the first few bites. He shrugged, picked up my half-eaten chicken breast, and bit into it himself. He shrugged, glaring at me. "Seems fine to me. No poison here, is there?" he said, and finished off the meat, glaring at me. He shrugged again, heading over to the canteen and grabbed another piece, put it on a small plate, and put it on my plate. It made us sick. He didn't even flinch. "Anyone who's feeling sick, it's all in your head. Visit the infirmary if you need to," he commanded and returned to his watch. This basically dispelled the rumors they were poisoning us or maybe adding chemicals. Centurions were a precious resource for humans. We had seen reels of spy footage showing how ordinary humans would sacrifice themselves to save one of them. Now here was one of their precious officers casually chowing down on a piece of meat we believed to be toxic. That hit something. We were told the food was too much for us to handle. They would be giving us some recovered rations from our previous post they found until they could tone the food down a bit to allow us to adjust. Water, at least, didn't seem to hurt us, but it was fresh, clean, everywhere. Even the water that came from taps was cleaner and seemed fresher than any we had ever tasted. Even the water was decadent. The water was so clean and pure we considered it a luxury. The absurdity of it all. We had water, but why, looking back, did it feel so dirty? Day 9. Food cube rations were handed over to us this morning, along with a side of fresh chicken meat with no spices or additives this time, just cooked. Bland, tasteless. A strange, seemingly boring meat, but it was meat. The first meat most of us had tasted since leaving childhood. At least we had stopped vomiting and were getting real food now. The humans explicitly told us to get used to the food as quickly as possible, as there was a very limited supply of the food cubes. The Empire was now starting to destroy its own supply lines. This means they were losing. It means we were losing. Destroying supplies and equipment after a battle was the telltale sign the Empire had no hope of recapturing an area, and made sure to leave nothing behind during their retreat. A common tactic, but probably not one we used in the numbers I'm thinking about. I saw those ships in the skies. I saw that battle. I saw the numbers humans had. I saw the capital ship they could bring into a planet's surface. I ate the food. I'm starting to think attacking humans was a bad idea. The humans finally put us to work today, or at least told us what was going to happen. It made me strangely happy to hear they were now on a full war footing, and that farming and other industry was in short supply in terms of manpower in the general area, thanks to thousands of men signing up for service in response to our declaration of war. Consequently, some industries were a bit undermanned. This made me happy. Maybe they weren't quite as impressive as I thought they were. Maybe just one cruiser was all they had? But why use a ship where you can drop an entire army on a planet as a prison ship? So many questions, so many theories. Time will tell, I suppose. Day 12. We were herded out of our bunks for a daily inspection this morning. During this inspection, Centurion Lanius spoke to us and explained a system we were about to engage in. Voluntary work. I remember most of his speech. Today begins our voluntary work program. Remember, voluntary. You don't have to if you don't want to. You will in fact be paid for your work. Whatever happens during your work, well, that's up to you. You will of course be under guard, and any escape attempt, well, you know what will happen. Besides which, for those who don't know, here's a little factoid. Did you know humans have this thing called the right to bear arms? It means that every human you see outside of this fence line is just as if not more heavily armed than the soldiers you see guarding this camp. So, keep that in mind. He said this with a chuckle, a strangely sadistic smile creeping across his face. All of us shared terrified glances. I remember those faces. Faces that effectively said, "What in the actual hell?" Expressions that effectively told each other whatever escape plans we had were instantly evaporated. Regardless, this is how the system works. You will be taken under escort to various industries outside the camp, and you will do a job you think you like. You will be paid in 2 ways, the first being camp scrip. This scrip will be used here at the camp to purchase luxuries such as sweets, books, or treats of whatever kind you can handle. The second being system credit. You will be paid standard wages by the hour at the job you work in. The money will be deposited into a bank account in your name. When you are out, one way or another, this money will be yours. Can spend it in whatever way you wish with fast-track recommendations to get you into the job of your choosing, or carry on as you were when all this nonsense is over. He said. I raised my claw. We are prisoners. Why are we being paid? Because unlike your wretched masters, we as a species believe the concept of slavery is an unforgivable crime against nature. We suffered the crime that is this practice long before we met any of you. The Ottomans, the transatlantic, the corporate wars, pre-globalization. We know what it feels like to be a slave, and we expended billions of lives getting rid of it. Prisoner or not, if you work, you will be compensated. Unlike your emperor, we believe in fair trade. He slowly approached me in line, staring me right in the eye as he slowly closed the gap between us. I nodded and nervously chattered. Now that we understand each other, make sure you know that you are under full surveillance. There's no escape. But then again, there isn't really an incentive now, is there? It's not like you have anywhere else to go. I shall repeat myself. This work is voluntary. If you just want to read books, by all means, go ahead. I shall simply encourage you to seek reasonable employment. You can either choose a new profession to try or go with what you know. It's all up to you. First bus leaves in 2 hours. Talk to the quartermaster in the bright red building there to seek a job out. Think it over, will you? He calmly explained, then walked away. I thought about it for a while. I didn't think it was worth it, but I decided to see what luxuries these humans had on offer. I may not be a slave in the traditional sense, but I sure as hell am a slave to this thing called chocolate. The shopkeeper responsible for the small tuck shop, as they called it, gave me a small piece of something called a Kit Kat for free after it caught my eye. I took it behind the bunkhouse and by the Emperor's unholy clagtrath. Was it the single most delicious thing I had ever tasted in my damn life? I must have more. I guess that's why I found myself signing for a job as a woodworker in a sawmill nearby. I wonder what humans do for woodwork anyway. Day 16. Furniture. It turns out to be a store that crafts specialty furniture. Luxury furniture? Tables, chairs, bed frames, sometimes wood flooring. But the wood that is used is the strangest but most beautiful kind I've ever seen. This sawmill stores wood logs in lakes. I didn't understand the concept of it. It was the oddest thing ever. Then I saw the result. A table made from a fresh log versus one of these water-aged logs. The color was vibrant, beautiful, deep. I asked how, because I now knew why. Apparently these are 100-year-aged logs. 50 years, a half-century. This absolutely terrified me. Firstly, the planning. They can plan ahead decades in advance. They can set aside vast areas of land to secure this planning, then think ahead that far. The sheer logistics behind this operation made my brain cease function for a while. I almost missed the training they had me go through for my actual job. Now they had the resources to do this in the first place. They had to cut down thousands of trees. I asked about this and was told they planted forests specifically for use years down the line just for this task. This made me terrified. What kinds of strategies or tactics could they possibly be capable of? How far ahead in a battle could they think? And more importantly, the level of patience they had to have to make this business work. Incredible. Humans didn't live long compared to most species in the galaxy. How could they even do this? To make plans for something you won't live long enough to actually profit from? It was about the time I finished my first table that I lost all hope for the Empire. Humans and their numbers, their planning, tactics. We had no hope of victory. Maybe we had the chance at a stalemate or perhaps a peace treaty. Who really knew at this point? My fears were confirmed shortly after this when that ship appeared again. Shortly before we were made to turn in for the night, a new group of prisoners were walked into the camp. Among them was one of our admirals. Mine, to be precise. Admiral Dekat Suham of Clan Umai, one of the best in our fleet. And the humans captured him. As I write this, he's in the main area receiving orientation and medical checks. I don't know what to think. Day 19. Admiral Dekat told me what happened. He moved a fleet of 200 ships into formation in orbit of the Great Sun, the first major colony our empire ever built. 200 ships. A fleet never heard of in our history. We never needed that much firepower. I will remember his words. We were ready. It looked like there was nothing that could stop us. A dozen dreadnoughts, my flagship, and every ship I could spare from the national fleet. We had 600 ships. I had every guardsman I could muster from every garrison in the area. I pulled back all our resources and pooled them in one place to see if we could try holding one place. He said with a tear in his eye. 400 ships, the largest fleet we had ever assembled. They warped in with a fleet of 3,000, including 60 warships we would consider impossible in size. Titan-class ships, 3,000. I was later told it wasn't the largest they had ever assembled. The largest they ever had was a cohort of 10 separate fleets, a total of 20,000 ships. 20,000? He held his head in his hands and wept. What was I supposed to do except surrender to that? 3,000 ships, an army of over 1 million men. By numbers alone, we would have lost. A few ships went down fighting, refusing surrender. They either were vaporized or they fled. I can't blame them. How are we supposed to fight something like that? He started to bawl like a child denied his mother's embrace and was incoherent for the remainder of that day. The homeworld was close. It wouldn't be long now. The last ships we had, everything we had would be brought to bear to defend the homeworld. We just lost 200 ships. At this point, there was no point fighting it. Day 21. Admiral Decat has calmed down, and I have gotten into a rhythm at my job. I wouldn't say my job was relaxing, but at least it was something to do, and I rather enjoyed it despite the circumstances. Random visits by their centurions, and even with the constant threat of their citizenry and soldiers making tables and chairs, was calming. I spent every damn credit I made on chocolate. I have been to the infirmary following my excessive consumption of the sweet substance. I have been lectured not only by several centurions, but also both Thrantar and the human medicae on duty about it. I decided instead to buy a book this time with my script and a smaller Kit Kat bar. More manageable, I suppose. I won't get yelled at by doctors. The newcomers have also settled into a calmness I never thought possible. Centurion Lanius had to once again demonstrate that the food wasn't poisoned after a few of the newcomers indulged a bit too heavily. That set everyone straight. I have settled as well. I have a new friend, Jerry, who works with me at the furniture factory. He shared lunch with me once. Nice guy. Day 30. Been a while since I had the strength to stay awake long enough to write anything in this thing. We have been at war with the humans for 6 months now, and I know for a fact we are losing. More and more prisoners were being let in. New faces, but all with the same expressions. Shock, awe, defeat. I had my first encounter with a legate today during daily inspection. Terrifying creatures that are more vicious than their legionnaires and taller than their centurions by a clear foot. I had to explain to this legate why my bedside table looked brand new and fancier than all the others. I told him the truth. I made it in my spare time at the furniture factory with spare parts and cobbled it together from several types of wood. Then I was allowed to keep it. He gently picked it up and inspected it closely. He commented on how I was able to actually mix the wood grains and wood types into a nice pattern. He told me it was a really good, solid piece of work and asked if I perhaps do commissions. I told him I would have to ask the company I now worked for. He nodded and said something to Centurion Lanius as he walked out. It seems I have a future in this industry after all. Day 38. Today I went to the store to buy chocolate and a new book. I had almost worn the pages of my copy of Napoleon's memoirs. I needed something new to read. And chocolate. I needed chocolate. I asked the clerk on duty if there was any way I could check my account. I wanted to know what kind of earnings this job would actually get me. He agreed and said it was okay to check. They were my wages, after all. I had earned not only through my own work, but through the various commissions for my tables and chairs I had been putting together on the side, over $2,000 worth of wages. Apparently $2,000 a month is enough to save up for a house or even land to build one on. I was told technically I was being paid the minimum for my work in accordance with labor laws. I went to the mill for work later and was told that if this ever ends and I decide to do this job professionally, I would be able to earn up to $6,000 a month just with the work at the factory, not including the side job I was now doing. This was a new kind of revelation, one that cemented we weren't able to fight against them. We were going to lose this war. They had a very robust economy and one that was well managed. Apparently a very different state of affairs today compared to what the world was a century before humanity took to the stars. Our own citizenry earned the equivalent of a medieval peasant's wages, despite the fact we built starships and terraformed planets. Most of what we earned went to the emperor and his cohorts for projects and expansion. Most of our food production went to the military to feed our soldiers. We simply wrote it off as the cost of an empire. These humans very clearly had other ideas. I still have hope we would push them back, that there would be a turn in the tide. I still have hope. Day 47. Admiral Decat, as it turned out, was a decent mechanic before he was conscripted, and found himself a job tending the massive quantities of advanced farming equipment we have here. I made him a special lunch chair he could use to sit down and enjoy his lunch. I guess I shouldn't call him an admiral anymore. Mechanic Decat seems undignified somehow. Today he was called in to repair some machinery, specifically the crane we use, and helped some of the other mechanics get it working again. Lunchtime arrived. Before spending time here, we considered a midday meal to be an unnecessary decadence. Now, though we understood why. Humans worked unbelievably hard for a species once believed so weak, harder than most of us had to. And they did this despite the fact they wouldn't live long enough to see most of that work complete or used. It made us question a lot of what we had been taught. We sat quiet at lunch, having already eaten our meal ration. He smiled. It's good to be home. I didn't respond beyond a sigh and waited for the sun to dip just below the ridge of an old church steeple. They won. They treated us with kindness, Bad behavior wasn't punished with violence, but with patience. They ate the same food they served us and drank the same water. Even in some cases, slept in the same bunks when something went wrong. They defended us from the actions of perturbed, rightly so, passers-by when we came here. They treated us not as enemies, but rather as friends. They won. Day 52. The Empire finally responded. A live broadcast was sent through every channel and network in the early morning hours. The Emperor himself had led a deep strike mission into the heart of human territory and were broadcasting the attack. They found their way to the human homeworld by sneaking in through unchecked void lanes and had a fleet assembled in force. 600 Imperial warships. He began a grand speech as the fleet approached Earth. It was short-lived as within seconds the humans opened fire and wiped half the fleet out. We saw in crystal clear view as the Earth fleet, a fleet of 100 battleships and dreadnoughts, used one precision strike to obliterate the Emperor's flagship. He didn't survive the blast. With leadership gone, the fleet went into disarray and were wiped out in short order. The Emperor was dead. The Emperor was dead. Killed by hubris, apparently. Lanius laughed at the speech shortly before the Emperor's flagship was bombarded into oblivion. I asked him why. Your Emperor is an idiot. He focuses on spectacle rather than substance, which is why he is announcing his intent to assault the homeworld. He has a distinct advantage, one that would have cost us dearly in the end and possibly would have made us lose Saul, at least for now. But the idiot is so high on his own ego he couldn't help himself, and effectively broadcasted his surprise attack to the galaxy, costing him any advantage he had. Thus far from intel reports, the only part of your leadership cast we have encountered thus far with even the most basic form of common sense has been Admiral Descartes. I don't really want to sound condescending or mean here. I mean, this is embarrassing, but holy Christ, in a canoe, this is bad. I question if you guys surrendered because you didn't want to deal with the incompetence, or if you surrendered because you actually knew something we didn't. If any of our leaders acted like this guy, they would have faced a firing squad. Absurdity. Pure absurdity. Lanius simply shook his head in disgust as the Emperor's flagship was obliterated. Those poor men. It really pains me to see so many dying for no real reason other than the supposed honor of obeying the orders of a man who should have no right to sweep a broom, let alone lead a nation. At least I can say for certainty that, judging by the faces in this camp, that at least some of you had the common sense enough to see the idiocy of it all and decide on incarceration rather than adding another number to an already pointless death toll. Such a waste of life. He shook his head and returned to his office to start writing out reports, or whatever he was doing. I didn't really have words. I didn't surrender because I saw flaws in leadership. I surrendered because I didn't want to fight something I couldn't win. Day 60. It's over. The attack on Earth galvanized the Terran Federation, and they sent an all-out assault on the Empire. It took them 8 days to effectively wipe out the Throne World's defense fleet. Within hours of landfall on the planet's surface, the entire Admiralty Board had either been executed, surrendered, or in 2 particular cases, outright defected. It was over. The Terrans are celebrating. Some of us are too, but not for the same reason. Lanius's words cut us deeply that day, and some of us weren't sure what to think anymore. But now the war is over. We aren't prisoners of war anymore. I wonder what happens now. End of diary. According to judicial records, Cato of Clan Savani was repatriated to his homeworld of Cassius Prime, where he used his accumulated funds to purchase land and a house. His prisoner uniform and diary can now be found at the museum in the surviving historical area of the detention facility camp, now in service as a hotspot for the Scouts and other youth organizations. Cato himself appears to be employed at his own company, making custom woodcrafts for locals. The Imbacani Imperium was officially dissolved and merged into the Terran Federation 6 months after the capture of the Throne World.